Here we go. Chronological order, showing you just how quickly fascism landed in Portland. You ready? Here we go. We're going to go back to July 15th, which was, I don't know, a little more than a week ago. There was a data dump called Blue Leaks. It was a cache of law enforcement materials that was recently hacked. And it provided an unprecedented look at communications between state, local, and federal law enforcement in the face of nationwide protests, and an analysis of nearly 300 documents that reference Antifa. They found that repeated instances of Antifa and left-wing protesting activities cast in cartoonishly grim terms, along with more substantive reports of lethal right-wing violence and threats that have scant mention from top Trump administration officials. Now, this leak technically dates back to when we were discussing the national narratives after what happened in Charlottesville, when the Nazis all rallied and Trump famously said, some of them were bad, but some of them were good people. And, what the national coordination was between local law enforcement, federal law enforcement, it came up again in the protests in Portland last year, when it was shown that Joey Gibson and the Patriot Prayer Gang from Washington, who are coming down to hold their violent street fight protests every week in Portland, were actually coordinating with the police. And there's been this narrative coming from the White House ever since that the violent Antifas are coming to get you, and the Antifa super soldiers who are, simultaneously beta cuck leftist soy boys who couldn't possibly be a threat, and also a national scourge that's going to, kidnap you and eat your babies and, make you Muslim or something. I mean, it's ridiculous, the narratives that have gone out there. But the Trump administration, the current regime, such as it is, has been harping on this note for years, that anytime there is a white nationalist act of violence, that it's always a lone wolf. But when there are protests, it's because there are millions of dreaded Antifa super soldiers coordinating all across the nation to drag the country down in their quest for anti-racism in policing. There was on June 2nd, the Department of Homeland Security circulated a tweet to law enforcement agencies across the country reporting that Antifa was stashing bricks to fuel protests. The intelligence made its way to a law enforcement fusion center in Maine. Last week, they tracked down the original source of the tweet, who turned out to be a far-right pro-Trump biker who goes by the name The Wolfman, who claimed that Facebook kept deleting his brick-planting evidence, quote, because they are BLM supporters. And this is what gets sent out. So when you hear things like Antifa is coming to, mob your small, quaint little village somewhere, and it's usually a Facebook post by, a 70-year-old white woman named Joan. Yeah, that's not a thing. So, this leads to the now famous video of the first snatch and grab that occurred in Portland the very next day. I'm going to assume that people have seen this. This is a protester standing on the street with his hands in the air, and armed goons with no badges, no ID, and a vague patch that says police take him, walk him out into the middle of the street, where a minivan pulls up. They throw him in the minivan and drive off. This is what we call black bagging. And this person was taken to a black site and then questioned without a lawyer present. And this is what really kicked off the firestorm of what the heck is going on. Why the hell is this not a bigger story? A major American city is being softly Pinocheted in broad daylight. And if we know one thing, if this president and his administration get away with this, it will only get worse. You'd have to be out of your mind or comatose since the fall of 2016 not to suspect that this could be a dry run for the kind of general urban mobilization at which the president has been hinting since this summer's protests began. That is not an inaccurate assessment. Senate rejects strict limits on military gear for civilian police. In the midst of all the black bagging and the tear gassing and the people getting shot in the head with less than lethal munitions that end up killing them, the Senate voted down an amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act that would have scaled back Pentagon's surplus military equipment program. The failed amendment would have barred the transfer of tear gas, stun grenades, grenade launchers, tracked vehicles, firearms of 50 caliber or higher, and ammunition of 50 caliber or higher, required more transparency on all transfers, and obliged the Pentagon to take back the gear if it was used against protesters lawfully exercising their First Amendment rights. Next day, Detroit on the ground, including DEA and FBI agents spotted in unmarked vans on 7 Mile and Evergreen this morning in Detroit. This is in a mall parking lot. And there are hordes. And these are vehicles, keep in mind, these aren't military vehicles. These are vehicles that are getting rented from like a local enterprise rent-a-car, okay? There are no federal plates. There's no window tint. These are literally people. The federal government is coming and renting cars for $39 a day from Enterprise and then packing 4 DEA officers into them and going out to suppress protest. We haven't even heard of an action in Detroit yet, and they already have troops there. Homeland Security Chief says feds are not the Gestapo amid outrage. Are you sure they're not the Gestapo? Really? These officers are not military, Wolf said. These police officers are not stormtroopers. They are not the Gestapo, as some have described them. The Gestapo, Nazi Germany's secret police, was notorious for arbitrarily arresting political dissidents. He talked a lot of crap, including, and this is probably the single most fascist sentence I will read today. This is what he said on Fox News. The department, because we don't have local support, that local law enforcement support, we are having to go out and proactively arrest individuals, and we need to do that to hold them accountable. Okay? The head of the Department of Homeland Security wants you to know that the federal government is going to proactively arrest individuals to hold them accountable. Proactively. They're going to proactively hold people accountable for actions they haven't taken, because that's what proactively means. And we're just going to keep pushing on. Turns out, this entire thing was well planned, and it was set into action months ago. And it was called Operation Diligent Valor. There you go. Turns out the U.S. Department of Homeland Security deployed more than 100 federal agents to Portland, Oregon on a mission named Operation Diligent Valor. The operation has involved the Department of Homeland Security's Rapid Deployment Force. It stepped up its response to, quote, increasingly violent acts in the Oregon City on affidavit by the Federal Protective Services Regional Director. According to the documents, there are currently 114 federal law enforcement officers in Portland to patrol federal buildings, including personnel from FPS, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, U.S. Marshal Service, U.S. Customs Border Protection. That's who these people are who are black bagging everybody. But I assure you it gets worse. Now we've seen them deployed in Detroit. Trump started talking smack about going to Chicago. And Mayor Lori Lightfoot came out and gave a big speech. They think sending the feds here is going to score points at their base. So good luck. Mayors are getting it done. We don't need you invading our city. Yeah. The next day, Chicago mayor agrees to allow deployment of federal police to Chicago after call with Trump. That's what it took. Trump spent 10 minutes on the phone with Mayor Lori Lightfoot, who has just been roasting him for months. 10 minutes on the phone, click, yeah, we're going to let the federal Gestapos come in, and we're going to help them, and we're going to let them coordinate with local police. Woo! That's how you stop encroaching fascism, Mayor Lightfoot. Well played. How bad is it? How fucked up is all this? It is so bad that Judge Andrew Napolitano on Fox News has come out and called all of this unconstitutional. This is the guy that Fox News brings on every time they need to talk about something in a legal sphere so he can paint it with a nice veneer of republicanism. This is kidnapping, not arrest. An arrest is a lawful restraint by a legitimate government authority pursuant to a warrant issued by a judge, specifically naming the person to be arrested, or pursuant to probable cause of crime personally observed by the arresting officers. Neither of these was the case in Portland. As such, this was kidnapping. Okay? Judge Napolitano is calling the federal government kidnappers on Fox News. So what does Trump do? Of course, Trump doubles down and states that he is going to invade U.S. cities with 60,000 Department of Homeland Security agents. We're going to all the cities. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be tremendous. We're going to have feds in so many cities. People are going to come up to me. They're going to say, Mr. President, I've never seen so many troops in so many cities before. It's tremendous. That's where we're at. We're going to all the cities, any of the cities. We're ready. We'll put 50, 60,000 people that really know what they're doing, and they're strong, they're tough. And we could solve these problems so fast, but as you know, we have to be invited in, he continued. At some such point, we're going to have to do something that's much stronger than being invited in. What? Nobody invited you anywhere. You have been deploying fucking unnamed goons in cities like Seattle, Detroit, Portland, Minneapolis, and Chicago for the last month. You weren't invited anywhere. You're like the world's shittiest vampire. You don't even follow that one basic rule. Ah. Hey, look, Department of Homeland Security plane lands in Seattle. Nice big ass logo on it. And if you were wondering, is that bullshit? Nope. Fed sent tactical team to Seattle, expanding presence beyond Portland. Of course, because stuff is so bad in Portland, you know what we're going to do? We're going to double down. Dude, there's fucking moms on the streets of Portland standing in front of fucking all black clad anti-fascist protesters and dads with leaf blowers and 15-year-old kids with umbrellas. And they're fighting the Department of Homeland Security out in the street because Trump wants to flex and be tough and show that he is tough guys because he's a wartime president. The only war that Trump is having is the war against cholesterol. I think he needs to sit this one out. But no, that's not in his nature, especially because he's trailing Joe Biden by 9 points and desperately needs to distract the nation from the fact that his COVID response has been shit. And now I take you to the cherry on top. The lead federal agency responding to protesters in Portland employs thousands of private contractors. It turns out that all these DHS soldiers aren't actually the DHS. Nope. What has not been widely reported in the media is the fact that the DHS unit that is coordinating the, quote, crowd control effort is an agency called the Federal Protective Services, and it is composed largely of contract security personnel. Those contractors are being furnished by major private sector security corporations like Triple Canopy, which is the company that came out of Blackwater after Blackwater had to change its name and then fold because of all the bad press they had from constantly killing civilians in the Middle East. If you don't know who Blackwater is, well, they're run by a guy named Eric Prince. You will often see him on Fox News. They will bring him on as a military analyst. He is also the brother of Betsy DeVos, she of the Department of Education, who wants to kill the Department of Education. So, let's do the summary wrap, shall we? Federal government brands protesters as terrorists, deploys troops into cities with no identification and no invitation. They black bag and kidnap peaceful protesters out on the street and illegally question them in a black site with no lawyer present. Meanwhile, cities still rage in protest and are giving people concussions, blowing off their limbs and killing them with, quote, less than lethal weapons that the Senate then refuses to vote to get rid of, thus further enabling both the state police forces and the federal Gestapo. It just allows them to continue gassing the shit out of everybody out in the streets for protesting and exercising their First Amendment rights. The president then doubles down, threatens to send 60,000 more federal goons all over the country, and has already deployed to 5 major metropolitan cities. And apparently he's calling up mayors, and whatever he's saying to him is having quite the profound effect, because none of them seem to be arguing. I saw Ted Wheeler, the mayor of Portland, was actually out in the protest, got tear gassed by the feds, made a stink about really wanting them to leave, but meanwhile, the senators, from the state of Portland, can't seem to even get a bill passed through the Senate outlawing the use of military force and military-grade chemical weapons in their own states. I wish I could say that we had slowly encroaching fascism and that things were moving along at a predictable pace. But all of this happened in a period of 2 weeks. 2 weeks. And the longer Trump trails Biden in the polls, the more of this kind of erratic, knee-jerk, violent action you're going to see, because Trump is flailing, trying to do anything to distract from the fact that we still have no handle on COVID, and we have 150,000 people dead, and we're about to reopen schools and unleash hell. It's going to be a long year, people.